Cartel Wives, Chapter 6. So last week on Cartel Wives, what we heard Val tell her Kato's story. Being with Kato, what she went through being with Kato, the physical abuse of dealing with Kato, the amount of pressure, street pressure that was on her dealing with Kato. So she ended up going to jail because of her first husband. And they wanted her to wear a wire on K, and she chose not to. When she came home from that, she basically wanted out of that relationship too, which kind of reminded me of the first husband, that she felt like she married him out of a sense of obligation due to the fact that he broke her out of prison. And they talk about Jay being there for Val when Kay passed away. They talk about his romantic side, how he rented out the whole restaurant for her, and how they ended up together. Around this time, if you guys remember in the Surviving El Chapo story, when Jay and Val got together and went and honeymooned in Mexico, Pete ended up in the U.S. running from the law because indictments was coming down on him out of Wisconsin, and he was trying to shoot it and get down to Mexico and get the hell out of Dodge. So this part of Cartel Wives and that part of Surviving El Chapo is basically same time frame right there. Here we go, Chapter 6, Cartel Wives.
Peter. Mia. Even though we'd moved to West Lawn, I still went back to Little Village to see my grandparents and my good friend Anna. My mom and dad would let me spend the night at her house, but both they and Anna's parents forbade us from going past their front yard since 26th Street, where she lived, was so infested with gangs. Anna had grew up just down the block from these identical twins named Peter and Junior.
Now remember, they call her Mia, but Viv's relationship with gangs was, she hated gangs at this time, you know what I'm saying? She felt pressure from the whole gang scenario, her father being a cop. As far as she was concerned, they were the scum of the earth.
She always talked about them, how cute and nice they were, and how they weren't in a gang, but they were always hanging around the neighborhood. I still went back to Little Village to see my grandparents and my good friend Anna. My mom and dad would let me spend the night at her house, but both they and Anna's parents forbade us from going past their front yard since 26th Street, where she lived, was so infested with gangs. Anna had grew up just down the block from these identical twins named Peter and Junior. She always talked about them, how cute and nice they were, and how they weren't in a gang, but they were always hanging around the neighborhood. I didn't get a chance to meet them all the years Anna lived there, though. My dad was in the gang unit, patrolling that area, and getting caught disobeying was not my idea of fun. But in 1996, the twins moved to 72nd Street, which was only a few blocks from my house. "Pete and Junior are your neighbors now," Anna said when she came over one day early on in high school. "Let's call them. I want to introduce you."
The irony.
Finally, I was going to meet the legendary Flores twins. I knew Peter and Junior had moved into one of the nicer houses in our area. It was 2 stories, and if you had stairs leading up to your bedroom, you had money. I'd seen them walking around, and even though I couldn't tell them apart, they seemed like they could be cool. They were handsome and wore nice clothes and...
So basically, Viv and Peter couldn't escape each other before they even really knew each other. It was Little Village status, that was the connection, and then boom, ended up in the same place again.
Anna liked them, so I suppose that was good enough for me. I was petite for my age, with blonde hair, but being Brazilian, I was blessed with natural curves and exotic features.
Porra.
I didn't look like your average 16-year-old girl, and boys in my high school were always gross, making comments about my body or my looks. When I'd meet a new guy, it would always go something like this. He'd look me up and down, throw his head back a little, and say, "Hey, babe, what's up?"
Pablo.
It was the total opposite of charming. The Flores brothers couldn't have been more different. When Anna introduced me to them, Peter shook my hand, looked me in the eyes, and said, "Hi, Mia, how are you? It's nice to meet you."
All right. Now, it's one thing we know, that the boys was well-behaved and had manners, all right? That's one thing you couldn't take from the twins. They had manners. Even Val said, she cut a handshake and said, "What the fuck is that? Nobody does that." So the handshake is a thing. They weren't overly gropey. Hey, girl, holla.
It was like his mom had drilled those exact words into his head and made him say them over and over. Who the heck talks like that and shakes your hand, I thought, especially a 15-year-old. Soon I started hanging out with them, and it was all innocent. We'd go to the lake, head downtown, or hit some parties. When the weather was nice, kids in West Lawn roamed around looking for something to do. But we were never up to anything. Not the Flores twins, though. The more I spent time with them, the more I realized that behind closed doors, something was just off with them. They were not normal teenagers. They were always wearing brand new clothes and shoes, which was strange to me.
I was getting it.
I'd ask myself, what 15-year-old doesn't wear the same sneakers twice? Their older brother Adrian drove luxury cars, had tattoos all over his body, and wore jewelry that shined so bright I could see it from down the block. When I'd pass by their house, I'd see random people detailing Adrian's fleet of cars and motorcycles. He screamed drug dealer. I was no dummy, and I put two and two together and realized that it wasn't just Adrian. Their family was making money some way, and it wasn't legal. Pretty quickly, I stopped wanting to hang out with them. They were super cool, but their life was foreign to me, and I didn't want to be around people like that. I'll admit I was pretty stuck up and prissy then, but now that I think about it, I really was too good to hang out with them. Plus, my dad told me they were bad news. I raided their house when they lived on 26th Street, he told me, and their brother Adrian went to prison 'cause he's a big kingpin. As time went on, though...
So I don't know if y'all remember when we were doing the Johnny Mitchell, Charlie Webster interview, which got completely demonetized, all 5 episodes, because you YouTube. They were talking about a time where the twins' father got indicted and they were coming down on him, and they said something, Charlie said something that was confusing about either the father put it on one of the brothers or one of the brothers, blah, blah. And I said, listen, the father was never going to be one that was going to say something on nobody. You know what I'm saying? Like, he was disgusted when he found out his sons was cooperating. So I didn't think it was him. But I ended up, after some research, some investigation, doing some clarification, it was the brother Adrian. The old man didn't put it on him. Adrian took the case. He took the heat for his old man, and he went and he did time. So I'm thinking that might be the same thing that... the same story that Viv's talking about right here.
Something about them kept calling to me, especially Peter. He was so much fun to hang out with, but at the same time, such a gentleman. He was mature, not rude and obnoxious like the other guys my age. Sure, his family was up to no good, but he seemed good on the inside.
How you know?
He'd already gone through things in his life, and it showed. He was like this little grown-up. One day, when I was 16, I decided to have a party at my house, with my parents' permission, of course. I told my dad I'd invited Peter, and he was not too happy. I've told you before, and I'll tell you again.
Y'all remember them 16 parties? Them basement parties? Shit. Why do you think our generation doesn't do that basement party shit for their kids? Because we was wilding the fuck out.
That family is trouble. But Dad, he's different. And besides, he's bringing his girlfriend. Peter's just a friend. When Peter arrived, my dad immediately had him cornered. I don't know what you're doing hanging out with my daughter, he said, but stay away from her. She's a good girl. Then, realizing the risk I'd put us all in, he added, don't tell any of your little friends from 26th Street where I live. Honestly, having a relationship with Peter was the last thing on my mind. Sure, I was with my boyfriend, Mark, but it was more than that. I just couldn't see myself with Peter. I liked his maturity, his whole demeanor, but sometimes it intimidated me.
Now remember, we learned about Mark. Supposedly Mark was part of the biggest police corruption scandal in Chicago history. They mentioned that at the beginning. We haven't gotten all the way into this story yet, but we will. And we're going to look into Mark on his own. I need to know what's going on with Mark.
I'd always dated selfish little boys, and now I was with a cocky cop-to-be. Maybe I wasn't too good for Peter. Maybe he was too good for me. Still, I identified with him. I spent every afternoon in school vacation cleaning the house and babysitting my brother and sister. So both of us, in different ways, were already living adult lives. While being grown up for me meant discipline and responsibility, Peter's version meant making real money for his family. And for him, money came from drugs. I'd heard friends talk about the fact that he was dealing, but I shoved it to the back of my mind and denied it entirely. Growing up in the city, drugs were just accepted sometimes, especially if they weren't out in the open. If you had to deal to get by, that's just the way it was, as long as it didn't spill out onto the streets and make a big mess. I imagined Peter's dealing was small, something to put food on the table, not a lifestyle. I soon found out that
By then, they was on some Vin Diesel, 50 metric tons a month type shit. And these fools was what, 17?
wasn't the case at all. Anna called me up and told me that something terrible had happened to his family. Someone broke into Pete and Junior's house, Mia. They tied up their whole family with masking tape, put guns to their heads, and stole a bunch of money they made from their business.
Damn.
I held the phone tight and thought for a second. A bunch of money? What do you mean by that? I didn't even know they'd had a business.
We didn't hear that story. They skipped that one in Surviving El Chapo. I don't know if we're going to get into it any deeper here, but it's also another thing for me to go look for.
What scared me even more was that a home invasion had happened right down the road from me. Stuff like that only happened on...
See, if you had the Citizens app back then, it would have told you that you live in the midst of chaos, and it's a miracle that you're alive right now.
Stuff like that only happened on 26th Street. Who and what are they bringing into my neighborhood? I worried. Peter and I didn't grow closer or grow further apart after that. We just stayed friends and neighbors, and I tried not to let on what I knew about him and his brother. They could do what they needed to do to make a living, as long as it was discreet, and I'd do what I had to do. For me, that meant making good grades in school, getting into college, and marrying the right man at the right time. So many of the guys I'd been dating had turned out to be jerks, so I was willing to be cautious and wait. I'd make sure that whoever it was, my parents would be happy with him. And until then, I'd live at home. I went to college for court reporting and did well, but despite that, I decided to take a year off because Mom and Dad just couldn't afford my school bills and support my brother and sister. I wanted to help out, and luckily Mom was in such a good position at her job that she could hire me. She and Dad had instilled confidence and a great work ethic in me, so I started working with her and earned good money. I made real goals: finish college, become a stenographer, and later on go to law school. I bought my own Mercedes and paid for the insurance myself, went to clubs on the weekend, and enjoyed mini vacations with my girlfriends. I just wanted to have fun, and I loved the fact that I wasn't tied down and didn't have to depend on anyone.
All right, so here we go. Even with the bare minimum, Val and Vivi were the type to want to live to a certain standard, even when they was down and out. So it's no surprise that when the game came calling and they were in the game, they was going to live that Bentley Benz or Beamer life.
A lot of my girlfriends were in serious relationships, and they weren't living life to the fullest, so I figured it was my time to be selfish. I was so giving at home that it was okay not to have a care in the world when I was out. I never took my eye off the ball at work, though. Sometimes I'd get home at 6 in the morning after a night out, just in time to take a shower and get lunches ready for my brother and sister. My mom would say, "You better not be late." But I'd get ready fast and wave to her as I passed her on the highway, arriving at work before she did. When she'd walk in and spot me, she'd smile and say, "Mia, you're crazy." It was the middle of 2002, and I was seeing Peter a lot, but just as friends. Even if we were dating other people, we always made time to call each other or go out to dinner. In fact, I rang up Peter as much as he called me. He'd always laugh and say, "Hey, I'm supposed to be calling you."
Now, this is another thing that Jay was saying about him and Val, that they was just friends. They was just friends. They was just friends. The whole time he was with Kato, they was just friends. While Viv is with other boyfriends, in and out of her life. her and Pete remain friends. It seems to be an ongoing theme of them, remaining friendly.
Every time we saw each other, the chemistry between us grew. But still, nothing happened.
So
On one
why?
of his visits, he invited me to take a ride with him to talk. Mia, why are you always picking the same type of guys? He asked when he was stopped at a red light. You really need to choose someone totally different than what you're used to. What he said or how he said it didn't feel too forward to me. I'd always felt comfortable venting to him, and giving each other advice was what we'd always done. But it got me thinking. Maybe he's right. Maybe I have been looking in all the wrong places. Peter and I made plans to go out the following weekend, and
Baby, he was telling you it's standing in front of your face. That's what he was telling you.
I couldn't get him or what he'd said to me out of my mind. I thought to myself, why am I ignoring my feelings for him? Is it because we're just friends? By the time the weekend arrived, I'd decided to stop being so careful and just go for it. I went to the mall and bought the prettiest dress and heels I could find. I knew exactly what would drive him crazy. That night, I put on full makeup and did my hair, and when Peter picked me up, looking incredibly handsome, and opened the car door like a perfect gentleman, I thought I was going to die from nervousness. We went to dinner at a beautiful restaurant downtown with some of his associates and friends, and I couldn't believe I was so jittery. We'd been friends for so long and hung out so many times that not feeling comfortable was a strange feeling to me. Something was different that night. We just couldn't hide the fact that we had feelings for each other. After dinner, we went to a club and laughed and danced and drank until the wee hours. When we finally left, my feet hurt so bad from my heels that he had his bodyguard carry me to his car. We went to an after party at his house, and Peter called me into the bathroom. When I walked in, I saw he'd filled the bath with water so I could soak my feet.
Listen, this is very early in the relationship, and as she's writing in this book, she's already like, and his bodyguard, she done got used to this is the life. She's already aware there's a bodyguard. She's already aware what they doing, how they doing it. He's Henry Hill. She's Karen. You know what I mean? They're going into the Copacabana. What do you do? Oh, he's in waste management, contracted. Nah. Viv knew what was popping.
On the edge of the bathtub, he took my heels off, and before he got up and I stepped into the water, I looked right at him and kissed him on the lips. You got it. I kissed him first. A few weeks later, we were sitting around daydreaming, and I blurted out, I love California so much. I went there once and I'd love to go back. Let's go. Right now, Peter said. I looked at him like he was crazy. I was working full-time, and I was so responsible when it came to work. I couldn't just leave a job like that.
Vámonos.
I'd never been impulsive, but the idea suddenly felt good. I thought about it for a few minutes, then blurted out, Okay, let's go. I didn't tell my parents I was going with Peter. I lied and said the trip was with some girlfriends, and I'd be back in a few days. Because I'd been working so much, my parents were thrilled I was leaving on vacation. Peter had booked a penthouse suite in Santa Monica, and it was like something out of the movies. When you walked into it through double doors, all you could see in front of you was the ocean. The windows ran floor to ceiling and wrapped around the whole penthouse. Our first night there, we ordered room service, had unforgettable sex, talked and laughed until dawn, and went shopping the next day.
I know right now, the brother Chad Divine in the chat is pulling his fucking hair out. He don't want to hear this love story. Let's get to the gangster shit. Enough with this sob story. Enough with these guilt trips. He's not with it. But I will say this. For as deep as the story goes from beginning to end, let's just say we start with when the twins are 7 years old. There's a piece of this story for everybody. And this love story, when they turn this into movies and TVs and these love stories, both of them, Val and Jay, Viv and Pete, there's women out there that's going to eat that shit up. They're going to eat it up. It's a moneymaker, you know what I'm saying? And then there's going to be the rest of us. Look, me, I don't like love stories in regular movies unless they move the plot forward. I don't like sex scenes unless they move the plot forward. Why are we stopping for this? This is some old 1975 shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't even know if I could say that word, instant demonetization, but I said 6 times already, so what does it matter? If it doesn't move the story forward or have something to do with the plot, I don't want shit to do with it. If it doesn't have nothing to do with the story, you just shoehorn it in there to shoehorn it in there, that I don't want to hear it. But it's an integral part of this story on many levels, and there is a community of people. Now, they might not be here. We a male-dominated YouTube channel. If you look at the numbers, and I can show you the numbers, the women that are on this channel, they represent heavy, so salutes to them. But there's people that's going to soak that shit up. It's not for all of us, but somebody's going to soak it up. And again, this story's so deep that you could just pull chunks out of it, and that's a movie, that's a TV show, here's a season. This little 3 minutes is at least a scene. Like, there's so much in it that's cinematic, so I get it. You know what I'm saying? It drives people crazy sometimes, the romance parts, but it's part of the story.
He took me to all the high-end boutiques, and I felt like Julia Roberts in Pretty Woman. I was sure I must be dreaming, and days later, when Peter said he had to leave early to fly to Mexico for a business trip, I was crushed. "I'll call you when I'm back, Mia," he said. Not 10 minutes after he walked out, the concierge called and said I had a delivery. When the valet showed up, he wheeled in 10 dozen red roses, courtesy of Peter. When he and I both got back to Chicago, we spent the next 2 weeks solid together. Then one night, he showed up unannounced, and we sat down together in front of my parents' house.
Esa se quitió del trabajo. She quit her job, boy, threw that job away.
He looked miserable. "Mia, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" He paused just a little too long. "Angela's pregnant," he said. Angela was his ex-girlfriend. She got pregnant when she and I were still together, before you first kissed me, and she's due in May. I'm getting back together with her. I'm going to make it work for the baby. I have to be a good father.
All right, so we didn't get this in Surviving El Chapo.
But I'd like to stay friends. You're too important.
Damn what? Also, that he just friend-zoned her? He did. He just friend-zoned her again, dog. He came home with a baby and friend-zoned her. Really? I thought he was going to tell her, like, I was napped and I just got away and this, that, the other. No, this took me left field right here.
I'm getting back together with her.
Damn.
I'm going to make it work for the baby.
Damn.
I have to be a good father. But I'd like to stay friends.
Let's be friends. Oh, shit. Let's go to California. Now, catch this baby and this friend zone real quick. Damn. Didn't see that coming. Did not see that coming.
You're too important to me, and I don't want to lose you. I think I went white. I knew he hadn't cheated on me. We weren't serious yet, or even exclusive, but I still felt betrayed. I'd worked so hard to really be someone, only to fall for a guy who got another girl pregnant. That wasn't who I wanted to be.
She basically had tried to stay away from Buddy. They kept in each other's peripheral constantly. Then when it went down, it was like, what kind of day late in the
Wasn't who
show?
I was. My mom used to say, "You're a diamond in the rough." And I took that to heart, always. Everyone I knew who was my age had kids from different people. And to my parents, to me, I was this prized package. At 22 years old, I made a firm decision that there wasn't going to be any baby mama drama in my life. I was ready to say goodbye to Peter Flores forever. And right then and there on my parents' front steps, I did.
Lie detector test determined that was a lie. Out of left field, Peter with the surprise baby. See, that's dope. I like the book. You get these wrinkles that you're not getting out of the podcast. I'm with that.
The heat is on.
The heat is on.
Olivia.
Val.
When Kay died, I didn't fully mourn. Even though I'd watched his body lowered into the ground, having his baby kept him with me, or rather, prevented me from really believing he was dead. My mom knew I was running myself into the ground trying to stay busy, so she kept saying, "This is not healthy for you or the baby. You need to stop and mourn." but my heart just wouldn't let go. I went to have an ultrasound almost 5 months into my pregnancy. It was the day I was going to find out if I was having a boy or a girl, and while I was lying on the table with goo on my belly, the tech rubbing the ultrasound wand all around for what felt like 10 minutes stopped. "Hold on," she said, looking kind of pale. "What's wrong? Please tell me." "Let me get the doctor," she said and walked out of the room, leaving me all alone. I knew something was wrong even before the doctor came in. "I'm so sorry," he said. "There's no visible heartbeat. I think the stress from your husband's murder was a major factor here."
Damn.
He sent me to the hospital, and there I said goodbye to my baby, a child I'd never had a chance to get to know. When I gathered myself together and wiped away the tears that had been pouring from my eyes for hours, I realized, it's not just my baby who's gone. So is Kay. I've lost them both. Right then, my whole world caved in. I was in so much agony I didn't even want to find out my child's gender. Knowing it would have made the death way too real. I probably should have been feeling this kind of deep pain during Kay's funeral.
I didn't know this either. I didn't know that she lost that baby. This is new to me.
I suppose it didn't matter now. I felt all of it that afternoon. When my baby died, Kay died with him. After I came home from the hospital, Junior was by my side through the whole ordeal, never saying one thing about himself. He made sure I was comfortable and didn't leave until I fell asleep. But that night he came back and he looked distraught. "What is it? What's wrong?" I asked. He started crying. "Peter's been kidnapped. Somebody got my brother. We think the cops are involved, but I've got a really bad feeling it's worse than that, Liv." He paused. "I don't think I'm ever going to see him again." "Shut up," I said. "Don't say that. Never say that. You've got to fight." I felt so close to giving up.
So this is the kidnapping we covered in Surviving El Chapo Season 1, Episode 4. So this is the Saul kidnapping, where Jay went to all the homies and said, "Hey man, we got a choice here. We can go to the feds right now and go get my brother, but we're all going to get indicted. Or we could pay them the 300 keys that they want and make that money up." And they decided to pay, and they made it happen, and they got their brother back.
But that was not something I was going to let Junior do. My baby was gone, but Peter deserved to live, and Junior had to fight to get him back. "There are these killers who've been kidnapping guys in the city," Junior said. "They rob them for work and shake them down for money. But they're not alone. They have these crooked cops doing surveillance and the dirty work for them." Whoever was behind this had gone after Peter because he and Junior were major players. By the middle of 2003, they'd become the most prominent drug traffickers in Chicago, selling up to 2 tons of narcotics a month. Their enterprise had Mexican-based suppliers, stash houses in and around Chicago, and dozens of workers, many of whom they'd known their entire lives. They were the highest link in the drug trade's chain of command, with access to the highest quality narcotics that could be found in the Midwest. That meant they had loads of money, and the kidnappers and some dirty cops wanted it. "So what are you going to do?" I asked. "All we can do right now is wait." We sat there in my parents' house, just holding each other's hands and feeling helpless. We knew next to nothing, and there wasn't a fucking thing we could do. For that moment, I put my pain aside. I needed to be there for Junior. He wanted to do something.
See, that's a wrinkle we didn't get in Surviving El Chapo. You know, we knew Jay was dealing with looking for Peter, trying to get Peter out. But we didn't know he was doing it while consoling Val from the death of her, from the death of Kay and from the death of the baby. You know what I'm saying? We didn't know that was happening.
Anything to get his brother home, and I just wished I could help him. I was so worried about Peter, too. Not just for Junior, but because I really loved his brother. Peter's outspoken and forceful like me, and I always identified with him. Sometimes I even thought that Junior wanted to be with me because I was so much like his brother. Junior's phone rang, and he answered. Hello? Oh, God, it's you, thank God. Are you okay? Is it Peter? I asked. Junior waved his arms at me to be quiet, then started to nod his head. Peter was alive. Okay. I'll give them whatever they want. I just want you out of there. He snapped his phone shut as he reached for his coat. I have to hand over $500,000 and 100 kilos, he said. They've got Peter, and I think Sergio Gomez is behind it.
So Sergio is Saul dirtbag from the other story. Remember, in this book, they changed the names of a lot of people. This book was published in 2017, so there's a lot of name changes that we heard the real names in Surviving El Chapo, but we're getting the fake names here. So Sergio is Saul.
Sergio has to be the one who kidnapped him. Word on the street is that he's got a crew of cops, and they've been kidnapping guys for work. Sergio's been reselling it all back on the streets. They're all in it together, Liv. He kissed me on the forehead and walked out the door. Sergio Gomez, I thought. Goddamn Sergio and some dirty cops.
Mia, I didn't see Peter from the time he found out about the pregnancy till after his daughter Sophia was born in mid-2003.
So they split up. So that did take them out of the game with each other for a little while when he came and he friend-zoned her. He stuck to his guns, I guess.
I was proud he wanted to be a good dad. My biological father hadn't been present in my life, so I knew that Peter being there was the best thing he could have done. The last thing he needed was to live with regret. I was devastated about us going our separate ways, though. It would have been easy to say goodbye to him if he wasn't this perfect person to me, but I missed him so much. It didn't matter what I was doing or where I was, my thoughts always came back to him. On my way home from work, I would drive down the street near my house hoping I'd see him. He and Junior owned this really successful barbershop called Millennium Cuts, where people would stand in line for 2 hours waiting to get in, and I'd always pass by expecting to catch him mingling outside.
If you talk to barbers in Chicago that worked there, they went and they collected barbers from all over the city that were dope barbers and offered them a job and treated them well, and people were excited to work for them. If you talk for dudes that worked in their barbershop, people were excited to work for them.
He and Junior owned this really successful barbershop called Millennium Cuts, where people would stand in line for 2 hours waiting to get in, and I'd always pass by expecting to catch him mingling outside. After Sophia was born, he called me from time to time. He told me things weren't great with his girlfriend, but he was head over heels in love with Sophia. I was genuinely happy for him. Even though I missed Peter, I ignored my feelings because being distant was what I wanted. We remained friends and even saw each other a few times, once at a dinner where I met Junior's girlfriend, Olivia. She was older than me, and she'd had a lot more experience in pretty much everything, which showed. I remember thinking, who is this girl? She is so unlike me. The thought passed quickly. I was more focused on Peter, and I couldn't stop asking myself, why am I not with him? I've stayed in relationships for all the wrong reasons, but being a father isn't wrong. But I just couldn't do it. I'd made up my mind. We had many of the same friends, and I often heard about him through them. One night, I went to dinner with one of them, somebody who worked for him. Her face was practically white when she sat down at our table. Mia, I don't want you to be scared, but I need to tell you something. Peter's been kidnapped.
Oh, shit.
I think I stopped breathing. Kidnapped? I only saw shit like that on TV, but it didn't happen where I came from. I'm not even sure what I said next. We think it was the cops, she added. My dad is a cop, and he's the most honest man I know. I grew up with the CPD.
Good luck.
I saw what they went through, though.
Good luck.
Going into war zones every day just to put food on the...
Good luck finding 5 of your fathers in a precinct anywhere in Chicago. And even then, at the end of the day, you don't know what he was doing at work.
Table for their kids. They were constantly disrespected by the people they were trying to protect. Why? Because Chicago police had been getting themselves into corruption scandals since the days of Al Capone. Right then, the bigger part of me was terrified for Peter, but another part was just pissed off. "You gotta be kidding me," I said. "What's happening? Where is he?" "His brother is working it out. He'll be home soon." After dinner, all I could do was think about Peter. If something were to happen to him, I wouldn't be able to live with myself. I worried about him all night, thinking I'll never get the chance to tell him how I really feel about him and how much I know we belong together. Peter's worst nightmare, and mine, had come true.
Olivia. I'd known Sergio Gomez since I was a kid, and he'd always been bad news.
Dirtbag.
Once, Kay had caught him creeping through our alley and circling the block. When he'd stopped him and dragged him out of the car, the only thing that saved Sergio was the fact that a cop passed by. I knew what he was up to, though. He was staking our house out, plotting to kidnap Kay and hold him for ransom, just like he'd been doing to other drug dealers all over the city. Now he'd gotten Peter. But where did the cops fit in? After Junior had paid the ransom, which was almost $3 million in money and drugs, and they'd let Peter go, Junior told me the whole story, and it...
Was it? Come on, guys, let's take a poll. Was it punk-ass Mark, Vivi's ex-boyfriend, that eventually ends up in the biggest corruption case in Chicago police history? Could it have been him?
It was just about the worst thing I'd heard in my life up to that point. Peter was behind their building, just a few blocks from Midway Airport, when he saw an unmarked police car. Oh, shit, he thought when two cops jumped out and started moving toward him. He'd never been arrested in his life. He didn't have anything on him, but when you're a drug dealer, cops freak you out. One of the police officers told him to turn around. He did, and the officer handcuffed him, read him his rights, and shoved him in the backseat of the car. "What am I being charged with?" he asked, but neither answered. Instead, the other cop jumped in the back with him, tied his feet together, and put a bag over his face. When they got to the Park and Go by Midway, they took him out and threw him in the back of a white van. That's when he knew he was in deep shit. They took him to a tri-level house and tossed him into the basement. When they lifted the blindfold, he saw someone who looked like a fireman standing in front of him. Except this was no fireman. He was wearing a hazmat suit, a face mask, and rubber boots. The walls and the floor were completely covered in plastic, with duct tape holding the sides down. The guy in the suit started beating him, and he didn't fucking stop till the phone rang.
Mia. Peter told me later that it was Sergio Gomez on the other end of the line. And even though Sergio was known for torturing people, he told the guy in the hazmat suit to take mercy on him. "Peter's not a violent guy," Sergio said, "so take it easy on him." The fireman then tied Peter to a chair and left him there for 24 hours without food or water. His only company was a parrot who'd been trained by one of the kidnappers. He squawked, "F*** you," all night long.
Bitch-ass bird.
Olivia. Junior came through with the ransom, over 100 kilos of cocaine and some cash, as quickly as possible. But it was shitty cocaine, and Sergio was furious. After teaching Peter a lesson, he had him call Junior. "Junior, you pissed them off by giving them that garbage," Peter said, sounding frantic. "Just give them whatever the fuck they want or they're going to kill me." Junior came through with another 100 kilos, this time the good stuff.
So we didn't hear that either. We didn't hear. Remember, I said Jay was playing cute before when he told dude, "What makes you think I could get you 300 Ks?" He's like, "Listen, if you'd have came to me yesterday, I could have got them for you. Today, they're gone." And it was like, "What are you doing, dog? You playing?" Peter had already told him, "Dog, just do what they telling you to do. We'll deal with the rest of this shit later." So evidently, half of the ransom was trash. They didn't want it. They were insulted by it, and he had to bring them back something better.
The kidnappers then gave Peter a cell phone and kicked him out at the Home Depot by Riverside, a suburb outside of Chicago. He called his brother, and when Junior showed up to get him, after teaching Peter a lesson, he had him call Junior. "Junior, You pissed them off by giving them that garbage, Peter said, sounding frantic. Just give them whatever the they want or they're going to kill me. Junior came through with another 100 kilos, this time the good stuff. The kidnappers then gave Peter a cell phone and kicked him out at the Home Depot by Riverside, a suburb outside of Chicago. He called his brother, and when Junior showed up to get him, he said Peter just looked different. He was pale, tired, and dirty. He didn't want to be around anybody.
Of course.
He'd been in the back of a van or in a basement, bloody and beaten for 3 long days, and part of him had changed forever.
Mia, Peter left Chicago and went to Mexico for a month just to get away from everything. I was so worried about him, but I figured he had to do what he had to do. He needed room to breathe and space to recover.
Hell yeah.
He decided he wasn't going to go after the guys who kidnapped him. That's the type of guy Peter was. All that mattered was that Junior had paid the ransom.
And that's just been my belief, was that, man, how could you run a business, how could you run an operation that big and let shit like that slide? You know what I'm saying? If Saul's punk ass is gonna come do it, and he's gone, and he's left breathing, and nothing happened to him, he don't leave scarred, maimed, something, how is it that the next Saul and the next Saul and the next Saul and the next Saul ain't gonna come and try the same shit? Because they believe there's no recourse.
And Peter was safe. Besides, he was a drug trafficker, so what was he going to do? Go to the police and say that one of their own had arranged his kidnapping? He also knew that Sergio was a paid informant and was always looking for a quick come-up. Peter had no choice. He had to move on. But given what he did for a living, and given what people were capable of doing to him, I started to wonder, should I move on?
Olivia. I was having misgivings about being with Junior, too. When he handed over almost $3 million in drugs and cash like it was nothing, it stopped me in my tracks. I remember thinking, oh shit, this guy is in it bigger than I ever thought. I knew Junior had supplied K, and I knew he had the money to afford the kinds of fancy cars he drove.
So this goes back to a time in Surviving El Chapo, early on, when I heard something that Val said that disgusted me. I don't know if she realizes how it came off, but when Kay died, in her mind, she didn't want to deal with the game no more, right? But at a certain point, she said, I knew I could feel his shoes. I believe is the exact words she said. And then she said, wait a minute, what am I thinking of? I don't want to have nothing to do with this. This seems to be her coming to the realization that I didn't want to have nothing to do with this, but here I am with Jay, and this is bigger than it's ever been.
Taking losses was the cost of doing business, but losing $3 million, that put him on a whole different level. I started to feel really conflicted. I thought, this is not what I want. I don't want to go back to this life again. I've never been one to hold anything back, so I told him, Junior, I'm scared for you. I don't want to lose you to jail or see you get hurt. I'm afraid you're going to get kidnapped like Peter or murdered like Kay. You're better than this. If you want to change your life, we can do this together. I love you, and I don't want to lose you. I love you, Liv, he answered calmly, but firmly. I know you've been through so much. I promise I'll make it right, so please just be patient. I paused and started thinking. If I've changed so much over the last few years, he can too. With all my heart, I believed him, and I believed in him, so I stayed.
Mia. Peter came back from Mexico after a month, and I was the first person he got in touch with. Oh, thank God, I said to myself when he called and said he wanted to come over to my parents' house. I was so relieved to hear from him. We hadn't talked when he was gone, and I'd missed him terribly. Mia, he said when he showed up that night. I'm so sorry, I just couldn't stay away. I can't stop thinking about you. Every thought just comes back to you and me. My happiest moments are when we're together.
Yo, this voice actor's interpretation of a man's voice is hilarious.
And I need you in my life. He paused and held both my hands tight. You can trust me. Your heart's safe with me. Oh man, I thought, it's decision time. Either I say goodbye to him forever, or I jump right in. I'd spent hours and hours going through our situation while he was gone, and I'd realized I could live with being a stepmom. But could I be in a relationship with a drug dealer? And could I, the daughter of a cop, willingly enter a life built on crime? Peter was everything I'd wanted in a person, and everything I thought a man should be, minus what he did for a living. But life without him felt hollow. I hurt without him around. I took about 30 seconds to remember how I'd ached when he'd been away, experienced it all over again, and made my decision. I wanted to be with the drug dealer with the heart of gold.
You in the game.
I loved Peter for all the goodness and kindness I saw inside him, and I choose to let the rest slide. Peter, I trust you, I said. Just please, don't break my heart. I promise I won't, he answered. From that moment on, I was a part of his world.
He let her out the friend
I didn't
zone,
see
y'all.
everything. In fact, he wanted to protect me, so most of what he and Junior did was out of earshot or behind closed doors. But I knew it was there. I justified it, too. I'd think, he's never known another life, and he's doing this because he needs to take care of his family. He had dozens and dozens of hardworking people under him, mothers and fathers who depend on him to help put food on the table. These people would be working at McDonald's if it wasn't for him and Junior. It was true. His employees made more in a week than people working minimum wage made in a year, and they were decent people just trying to give their families a better life.
She's going through the whole reasoning process. It's a process that everybody that does something questionable has to go through, all of us.
Olivia. In Chicago, Peter and Junior were constantly busy. They had dozens of customers, and every time a shipment came in, they had to know exactly which warehouse it was going to and who was unloading it. Then someone had to deliver the goods, collect the money, and count it. There was an unbelievable amount of money coming in, too. Tens of millions, all stacked up in their stash houses.
Mia. Peter took me to his stash house once. We were driving through the West Loop, right near Oprah's Harpo Studios, when he coasted his car toward the garage of a townhouse. Mia, this'll only take a minute, I promise. It's beautiful over here, I said, looking out my window. I know, that's the whole point. Our stash houses are in upscale neighborhoods where the cops won't look. There were no cars around and definitely no cops. Somebody could step out of a car and give somebody a bag and it wouldn't look suspicious. Back in Little Village, there was a cop on every corner. If someone handed you a bag, you'd be cuffed in seconds. The townhouse had to be worth at least $1 million, maybe $2 million. As we walked inside from the garage, I could see beautiful furniture, really high-end stuff that you'd never picture in a drug den. Peter moved toward a wall and pulled a handle, which popped the wall right open. It made that whoosh sound that hydraulics make and opened really smoothly like it was floating. I took a peek and gazed upon more money than I'd ever seen in my life. When I walked into the room, I saw stacks of it.
Come on, man, that was early.
Now,
how many girlfriends y'all think they was showing this stuff? Or was these the only girlfriends they was pillow talking with like this? It's playing a dangerous game. I get it. They were young, but goddamn.
Banded together and scattered about with 2 workers running the bills through several money counters. They're going to be counting for a long time, I thought.
Sit your
Olivia.
ass in the car.
One night, Junior left Hoops early to meet up with someone. I was with him, and on the way out, we bumped into R. Kelly, who he balled with practically every night. "We'll meet up tomorrow," Junior hollered as we walked out. "Something came up." We got in Junior's car and drove to one of his and Peter's stash houses. "Can you get the garage door opener?" Junior asked. "Sure," I said, grabbing a labeled opener from his bag. It was hard to figure out which one to pick since there were so many, and they all had code names. This looks pretty damn sophisticated, I thought to myself. All of their stash houses had attached garages, so no one would see us or our car. Once I was inside, I met all the workers. They were dressed up, business casual. They weren't allowed to wear flashy jewelry. They had to be clean-cut. You'd never know they were drug dealers or that they were carrying money. They were well-spoken and didn't look like they were from the streets. Behind closed doors, I met their personal property manager, who they paid to secure all their stash houses and warehouses. She used to come up with fake papers, everything from credit reports to bank statements to IDs.
That's Ashley. I think that's what her name was. Ashley. If that's what she's talking about, the girl that would get them the stash houses, that they said they had to catch her in good mental health or else they lost that motherfucker for however long, couldn't find her.
And get condos at $7,000 or $8,000 a month in rent. She'd say something like, "I'm dating a politician and I don't want anyone to know, so I'll just pay for the year up front." The landlords wouldn't do background checks with that kind of money in their hands.
She was an actor. That's what they had. An actor and an active liar. Now, acting and lying is two different things. And any actor will tell you that. Any liar will probably tell you that. She was both.
Mia. I learned how the stash houses worked. When money came into a house, workers would count it immediately. Each house never had more than $7 million in it, and counting $1 million took each worker probably 2 hours. The stash houses that only held money were equipped with soundproof rooms, just like in a recording studio, because there were several counting machines going at the same time. The workers counted and packaged money in 3 shifts a day, each 8 hours long.
You gotta
Olivia.
be impressed. You gotta be impressed with the infrastructure. You gotta be impressed with the infrastructure, man. The systematic approach to it. These fools ain't just have a barn, you know what I'm saying, with a bunch of bricks stacked up against the wall with a goat guard in it. Do I believe that they were loose with, you know, like I said, and like we've said a million times, and we've given them reason. We say, oh, they were young, or it was their calling card, is how it was, and this, that, and the other. For as many mistakes as were made, there was some brilliant happening. And they had systems. They had this is this much in the house. They knew how long it took to count this. They knew how long it took to get that there. They knew what mattered. Knew that the breakage was just breakage. Knew this, knew that. You gotta be impressed with the system, man. I'm a person that I appreciate functionality. I like things to function right. Whether I'm on stage, whether I'm making a movie, whether I'm shooting a video, whether I'm editing something, no matter what I've done in my life, it's always if it ain't functional, well, then what's the purpose of it? I don't want to have to do too much for it to work. I want it to work the way it's supposed to work, the way it's designed to work. So I can appreciate it.
Different workers would pack up the drugs, and they do it really carefully, with cling wrap, vacuum bags, duct tape, and fabric softener sheets to minimize the scent so the cops and canine unit wouldn't be able to detect it if one of their workers got pulled over. Never, under any circumstances, did a crew member go to a house other than the one where he was stationed. If someone was working at a house, they stayed there. Going in and out too often looked bad, and Peter and Junior trained their workers never to draw attention to themselves or what they were doing. Their workers always kept the same responsibilities too, never switching out. Peter and Junior's first job had been at McDonald's,
It's not
where
your
they'd
cheese.
learned this every worker to one task system. Every employee there did the same thing every single day. The fry guy dipped his basket into the bubbling oil. The girl at the drive-thru handed you your order. Some other girl took your money. If you were only doing one task rather than 10 different ones, it was harder to fuck something up. They built their whole infrastructure around this system.
You got one
It
job.
was genius.
Mia. Peter had so many burner phones, one for each customer. At any given time, you could expect him.
Again, the phones is another thing. We just heard in Surviving El Chapo yesterday. They got out of jail. He saw FaceTime instantaneously. I don't know if it was J or P. Instantaneously, their mind went to, wow, this FaceTime shit would have helped me in my business so much. I'm sure 50 phones per person wasn't a very practical thing, but it was probably the last thing technology would allow them. It's like, man, the easiest thing for us to do is really walk around with the 50 phones. You know what I'm saying? Whereas to now, technology would have probably streamlined that, right? And the twins would have figured that shit out the moment the technology existed. Oh, we could do this now. We don't need the 50 phones. We could just encrypt this and do this and do that, and they would have figured that out. That's the way the system rolled, the design of the system and the design of how they're wired. They're always looking for the best functionality. Yes, 50 phones isn't practical, but it was as practical as it got for the time. It was the best thing that they can do. So then now, if things were, now they look at things and they say, damn, this would have helped, this would have streamed like that. I wouldn't need the 50 phones. It's pretty dope to see.
To be hauling probably 20 phones around with him, and they rang constantly. He'd answer every single call. Then a few weeks later, he'd toss the phone, get a new number, and start all over. I've never seen anyone multitask like that.
Olivia. Junior and Peter had dozens of cars and trucks and were constantly inventing new ways to move drugs around Chicago and beyond. They switched up vehicles like they switched up phones, buying the same model and same color car so that neighbors wouldn't realize that there were different workers coming in and out of the stash houses. They also outfitted these cars with secret compartments. One could be opened with a foot pedal that you could activate only when you turned on the defroster and rolled down the windows. They'd moved way past hiding pot and gas tanks. That was the stuff they'd done for their dad when they were 7.
Mia. Most of the time, Peter and Junior thought they were flying under the radar. And except for Peter's kidnapping, they were, at least initially. By the middle of 2003, the Drug Enforcement Administration was on to them, and they had people on the ground in Milwaukee investigating them. Why Milwaukee? Because it was a major distribution area for them. They constantly sent drugs there through one of their many couriers.
Olivia. In fact, Milwaukee was one of the first cities they expanded out to as their empire began to grow. When Adrian was in prison for drug conspiracy in 1998, one of his associates named Tony Arevalo introduced Junior and Peter to a couple of connects from Mexico, and they began shipping cocaine right up Interstate 94 to Milwaukee.
Mia. By the time Peter was kidnapped, DEA agents in Wisconsin had started to question street-level dealers who spoke in hushed tones about Peter and Junior. The investigation led back to Chicago, where the feds were trying to build their case and had started sniffing around.
Olivia. All that time, they felt they had to keep working. But Peter thought he was putting in more time than Junior, and he was on his brother's ass because of it. "You're slipping, Junior," he said. "You care more about your girl than your business." Junior didn't care. That was just Peter being controlling. Junior always handled his business. In September 2003, we got a beautiful condo together in Lincoln Park. Some people were mad that I hadn't waited a year to find someone new after Kay died. But I couldn't help what had happened. You can't dictate when you fall in love. We moved together with Xavier, who was in middle school and was growing up to be this wonderful little man.
So, this is consistent with what she said in Surviving El Chapo. She has not changed her story. It's a consistent story.
After all that my son had been through with the men in my life, I was initially reluctant to have him get to know Junior. I'd told myself that if I ever moved on from Kay, it would be with someone who worked a 9-to-5 job. But I fell for Junior when I saw the good in him and the great father he was to Samantha and Sasha. I knew I could trust him. Xavier absolutely adored Junior, and Junior felt the same. He'd drop my son and his friends at Dave & Buster's or spoil him by buying the new Jordans that were always so hard to get. To Xavier, Junior was this hip, cool guy like his buddy, and when I saw them together, I'd tell myself, "It's okay, relax. You're being a good mom by surrounding your son with good people who love him." I think that Northside condo is where we really became a family. Junior had Samantha and Sasha every other weekend, and I babied them like they were my own. I'd always wanted a daughter, so I secretly wished they were mine, and I'd change their pampers, shower them, cook for them, and comb their hair. They would tell me, "I want to be pretty too," so I'd let them put on my makeup and play dress-up with my clothes. We did everything together, me and Junior and the kids. And when they weren't with us, we were traveling and living it up. We sat ringside at the De La Hoya Mosley fight in Las Vegas. Junior invited all his friends, who happened to be his workers, and he rented out 60 rooms at Mandalay Bay for them. We all went out and shopped all day, ate steak and lobster for dinner, partied in the VIP sections of clubs at night, and
Eating,
had
drinking, fucking, sucking, snoring. Just that Scarface life, man.
drunken sex till the morning. It was exactly what Vegas should be. That Christmas, Junior gave me a ring. It was this big, beautiful yellow diamond ring, around 7 carats. Is this an engagement ring? I thought. But Junior didn't say anything, and I didn't ask. I knew I wanted to marry him someday, but it could wait. "Let's go to Mexico for New Year's, baby," he said that night. Without any hesitation, I agreed. We drove 36 hours to Mexico and talked the whole way about everything. Our kids, our families, and how we wanted them to come together in the future. I didn't care whether the ring on my finger meant anything or not. All that mattered is that I was with Junior. We went to his family's ranch in San Juan, a few hours away from Guadalajara. Within days, I think I'd made up my mind. On that gorgeous plot of land in the middle of nowhere with more horses than people, I thought, I'm safe. Nothing is going to happen to us here. We don't have to worry about someone coming to kidnap us, or rob us, or the feds taking Junior away. Simplicity, family, and love are all that matter, and we
Sounds
can
good.
have that here. I've changed, and here, Junior can too. I broke the silence. "Junior, let's stay. Let's just stay in Mexico forever." He looked me straight in the eyes and agreed. All he needed with him was his brother.
Mia, if Peter was feeling the heat, he hid it from me. That winter, he got me a condo off of Michigan Avenue and I moved in, all on my own. I was 23 years old and I'd never lived away from my parents. I even quit my job to go back to school to become an esthetician. Peter and I were planning to open up a spa together. When we weren't holed up in that beautiful apartment, falling in love with each other all over again, we were going out to eat, making plans for our future business, or shopping at Chanel or Cartier right down the block. Unfortunately, that January, bad things started happening in the midst of what should have been the happiest time in Peter and Junior's lives. One of their employees, a guy named Stubby, ratted on him and Junior. The feds raided one of their warehouses, then another, seizing over 400 kilos of cocaine. In late February 2004, Peter and I were together at my condo. We were relaxing and talking like we always did. We decided to watch a movie, cuddle, and go to sleep early. While we lay in bed, he made me laugh so hard and so much that I suddenly became exhausted. Before I passed out cold, he told me he had to work the next morning. That wasn't unusual. I'd begun to understand his life, but I didn't ask questions. When you're so happy, young, and carefree, you just go with it. At least I did. The next morning, Peter woke up, rolled over, and looked at one of his 20-some phones. Oh, shit. I have 20 missed calls. Did I turn the volume off? Missing calls was basically a drug dealer's worst nightmare. Something was wrong. Really wrong. Peter switched on the volume and the phone rang immediately. Alicia, I'm so sorry I missed you. What's up? Alicia was his sister. He paused while he listened to her. Oh my God, call the lawyer and don't say anything. I was terrified.
They coming.
What is it? Is everything okay? Peter didn't answer. Instead, he moved toward the window and pressed his face against it. What are you looking for? I asked. The feds. They raided my house. They also hit the barber shop and Junior's house. They're looking everywhere for me and Junior. I gotta go. He was pulling on his shoes when another phone rang not 3 minutes later. Sylvia, he said. That was another sister. Oh my God, get out of there and don't say a thing. Call me later. Peter moved back to the window to scan. Mia, I need you to drive me somewhere. The feds raided my sister's house. I didn't even ask who he was supposed to meet. I just pulled on some clothes, got my keys, walked to my car, and started it up, afraid the whole time. As I drove, I was so nervous. I was worried I was going to hit something. The only thing I kept thinking was, I can't drive through a red light. They'll catch Peter if I do. When we finally got to a parking lot a few miles downtown, I looked at Peter and said, Am I ever going to see you again? He smiled, took my face in his hands, and kissed me hard. Of course, you're going to see me again.
Chad Devine, the homie's head just exploded right now with all this love story, boy. His head just blew up. Wherever he's at, his shit blew up in the chair. I'm sorry, bro, that watching my channel, your shit blew up in the chair, but I can see it happening right now, dog.
And with that, Peter Flores walked out of my life, left the country, and didn't return to the United States for almost 5 years.
Damn. Heavy shit. We did it. That was chapter 6 and chapter 7.